You mean that it was ridiculous because people were calling you Patrick Fucks?
Some Americans, Christian Americans, avoided calling me by my name because they were afraid it was like fuck.
Hammer King are a German heavy metal band founded in 2015. Just last month, they released Kingdemonium, their fifth studio album via Napalm Records. Patrick Fuchs, better known as Titan Fox, is the founder and the singer of Hammer Kings, and he joins me today. So, Titan, thank you so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure being with you. Thanks a lot. So the pleasure is all mine.
Patrick, before we get into the band itself, how are you? I know that we all want to believe that COVID is behind us, but as winter approaches us in Europe, a lot of my musician friends start to worry about whether we're going to see restrictions again and all of that. So how did you and the band handle this forced silence during COVID?
I really do hope that there is nothing coming up again. We had, so far, we were very lucky because the first time that this whole lockdown thing started, we were actually supposed to enter the studio last year, and we did. So we recorded the Hammer King album, which got released in 21, directly when the lockdown started. We released it for the summer, and we could play a couple of shows, like 8 or so shows, most of them open airs. And then the winter came, and the whole crap started again. And then once they practically ended everything this late spring, we were practically already out of the studio with Kingdomonium, so we could play the concerts absolutely as scheduled. I think we missed one in 22, which got pushed back. I think it was one, but everything else took place as planned. And I really hope that everything will continue like this. And if I'm sarcastical, I will say that when the government, we had a ticket for the train, which cost only €9, and you could go everywhere. So the trains were absolutely packed till under the roof. And when the government enforces this, they will not tell me in autumn that it's impossible to go to a club, please, because they stuffed the trains beyond belief. So I think either you go one direction or the other. So I think live and let live. There are ways to deal with the situation, and we all know that there is no certainty in life. You can't be 100% safe, never, with anything. So I think we should be at a place now where we can live with that. So that's my opinion. I hope it's right.
I think that we've also seen that there is a cost to prohibiting concerts, for example, or to prohibiting in-person contact that went beyond just the financial aspect of it. For example, I teach in higher education, and it really psychologically affected the kids a lot, for example, to be so deprived of any sort of significant and meaningful physical contact with other people. So you need to also make a balancing test at the end of, well, some things are going to happen. We do the best that we can.
I totally agree. I think that when you look at schools, especially for younger people, I believe that the price was too high. So they will. I know children that went to school and they had COVID. It was a thing for 5 or 6 days. But the problems that they have now will probably be longer than 6 days, maybe 6 months, 2 years, whatever, until everything is back to normal with them again. It was a shock for younger people. I mean, for us grown-ups, it was tricky, of course.
And was it a very financially I don't know, of course, what is the dependency that you have necessarily on touring on the level that Hammer King is right now, but was it a financially very damaging situation?
We had everything going on pretty well, so we were at the studio whenever there was a lockdown, and it was by coincidence actually. So things were very good for us. But if it came back now in winter, we would suffer probably, because we invested a lot into the band in the last 2 years, and we now definitely need to play the shows. So if they push back things for half a year, I mean, we will survive, but it will be very hard. So hopefully it will go as planned.
Tell me a little bit about the history of Hammer Kings. Why did you want to start the band, and what were your aims with it? And I mean, outside of the band's mythology.
So the king called us, but otherwise, once some of us played together in other bands before, and we were working on a studio album for an older band before that, and we had the feeling that the songs were good, but something was missing. So in a way, I remember saying to the guys, I have a very, very traditional song. I was almost afraid to show it because it was so traditional. It was so different from what we did. Would you like to try it? And we tried it. And after a couple of bars of music, we started smiling because it was so refreshing to play something with big open chords, and you felt that you can put vocals on top of it. There's lots of space for vocals. And we did that. And we felt very good about it. So in the end, a couple of no, I think in the next week, on the next rehearsal, KK Basement, who was the original bass player, he came and said, I got a part for that song. And I remember saying, I also have a part for that song. So maybe we have two songs here. And he showed us the parts. And I remembered I have an intro that we couldn't use because it was so melodic. Let's put it into to that thing. And we had another song. And there was a moment at the same rehearsal when we played the new song, the second one. The recording device was running, and the song ended, and I started playing a galloping rhythm. And Dolph joined in on the drums, and we played something that led up to almost to the chorus. So we had three quarters of another song, and this all happened within two rehearsals. And we realized we had something going that was different from what we did before. And I think within 4 weeks we had enough material for an album that was only that direction. This very traditional, melodic, very stripped down metal approach. And then we knew that is different. We think it's better. And we started singing about a king by coincidence because the king called us. And we knew there is a certain king thing in lyrics, and Dolph was the guy I think to remember. Dolph was the one who said, "Let's go for Hammer King." I mean, that's very brutal. And we looked it up on the internet on the Metal Archives homepage, and nobody used that name, which is hard to believe because it's so obvious. And then we said, okay, then that's the call. We just used the name ourselves, and we changed everything within a couple of weeks, and it felt very good actually. And so we recorded that album. We got the contract with Cruz del Sur from Rome. We released 3 albums with Cruz del Sur. We got in contact with Napalm, and they wanted to do something. So the rest was pretty easy going, actually, the COVID thing aside.
You mentioned the kind of traditional sound, and today when I was listening to Kingdemonium, for example, as well as some of your older albums, it reminded me a little bit of. You said stripped down. I don't know if I would use necessarily that description, but it reminded me of stuff like certainly Manowar or Judas Priest or Running Wild. Are these kind of where your influences were, or was this a new kind of adventure in music that you wanted to try? Because you said that you were not playing this kind of music before.
I think that for most of us in the band, uh, these bands were like the DNA of what we are as musicians, as fans, and as players as well. But we never did it because we always thought back in the day we thought, oh, that has been there before. We have to change it. We have to try and look for something more innovative. And we liked Nevermore, for example. That was one of the few bands who really could create something quite new in a way and still remain traditional, sort of traditional. But I remember when we started playing that, Gino was the first one to say, actually, I'm very happy because that is what I really like. That's what I've always listened to for all of my life. But he was a bit reluctant to change it because he thought for the guitarist it's not tricky enough, so it's too easy. But in the end, we found that, I mean, if you listen from the Kingdom of the Hammer King album up to Kingdomonium, which is the fifth, of course there is a progression. Of course we have slightly progressed in style as well. So maybe the first album was relatively stripped down if you compare it to Kingdomonium. Kingdomonium is not very stripped down. That's a very very much arranged album, of course, but it's still within the same realm of music, if you want so. So for us, it was. I always say if I'm very in a very good mood, I always say I think that whatever I did and whatever we did before that all led to doing Hammer King in a way, because this feels the most natural we have ever felt, and that's where your strengths are. If it's really natural, so we have found this thing that really works for us, and once we started this, we have stopped reflecting too much and just follow the instinct and follow the feelings. And music, metal music, has to come from your heart anyway.
You mentioned this thing about being picked by the king. Tell me a little bit about this mythology, because I know that every album in the Hammer King discography kind of tells a little chapter of this mythological story that you've constructed around yourself. So, can you tell me a little bit about it?
It's pretty easy because, of course, the Hammer King is the most ruthless ruler of all worlds. He's got a gigantic hammer. But the thing is, when you give your life unto the king, you're allowed to live in his kingdom, which is more or less entirely made out of gold. There's lots of money, lots of women. Most of them are naked all the time, and so on. Whatever you think. And then we have to preach his words, which means that every album is about, as you said, about a chapter in the mythology of the king. The first one was only about the kingdom and the people living there, like the Chancellor of Glory and so on. The second one was a very battle-laden album. The King is Rising was the second, while Poseidon Will Carry Us Home was a bit of a nautical album. The Hammer King album from 21 was quite focused on the king himself, while Kingdomonium now is an album that deals with this pandemonium situation, with all the chaos that we have in the real world, which is also happening in the mythology, because the kingdom gets attacked by evil forces, evil spirits, and at the end the king will remain victorious. Of course, that's the deal. But that, for me, that was interesting to see. We did that with Awaken the Thunder on the 21 album last year. That was the first time where we practically openly included a theme from the real world into the Hammer King mythology. And so we knew we can do that, and it felt very liberating to do that on the Kingdomonium album, because we have found a way to tell stories that can address the real world, and everybody can find himself in the stories, and at the same time we can continue telling the mythology of the king. So probably that's what we want to do in the future.
Are you the person coming up with that story, or is it kind of a collaborative process?
We always say that different members of the band receive the music given by the king, but when it comes to the lyrics, mostly I do so. Yeah.
And what are your influences when it comes to this sort of fantasy theme? I mean, do you like? Is it a TV thing, a movies, or books? What is it?
Interestingly, nothing. I used to listen to the Beach Boys like 6-7 years ago, when I was reading about Brian Wilson, who of course is a very strange person. But he always said, "I don't write the music, I receive the music." And in a way, I think it's not totally wrong what he says, because when we start working on music, I go into a sort of an autopilot mode. It's it's a mixture between being awake and dreaming. Actually, you're not very focused. Like when you're driving on the highway, you drive for hours, but you're not really here, but you're not really sleeping. It's something in between. And creating music is basically the same. So once we get into that mood, the ideas really start flowing. You pick up the guitar and you play anything, and after a while, you probably end up having something quite valuable. And so there is no real inspiration or a certain source. Very frequently, when we have music and I start singing some gibberish, something about over the chords and over the riffs, there are certain phrases that happen, and some of them you just keep. Like "The King is a Deadly Machine" from Poseidon Will Carry Us Home. It was a jam session, and I sang "The King is a Deadly Machine." Everybody looked at me, keep that. And of course we kept it. So things like this keep happening.
Kingdomonium is another one of the albums that you've recorded with Charles Greywolf from Powerwolf. He's obviously most famous for his work in this band, but he also has this studio, the Studio Greywolf in Germany. What keeps you coming back?
Oh, actually, many things. First of all, Charles has become a friend over the years. We share our passion for the Ramones and for sushi, and there's a very good sushi place quite near the studio. And at the same time, I mean, interestingly, he lives nearby, which was at first one of the reasons why we went there, actually, because we knew we can go there. It doesn't make sense to have a studio in Hamburg and you have to drive like 6.5 hours. So it was, by coincidence, it was nearby. He is a fantastic person. He's very relaxed. I mean, we recorded the choirs for Kingdomonium only on one day. And so we started, I think, at 10 o'clock in the morning, and we ended at no, we started at 9 o'clock, and we ended at close to 11 in the evening. So that was like 14 hours of singing O's and R's, which is very, very straining. And Charles was sitting there 14 hours with the headphones straight. and he was concentrated even after 14 hours. So he's a very reliable guy. He's very, very, very nice to work with. And I think with Charles, we have found a way of sort of co-producing the albums where we trade ideas back and forth. I'm very reluctant when he says, "Wouldn't you like to try this?" Mostly I say no, but sometimes when I say yes, then it's a very good idea, and so that is, it's very natural, and we don't see it end. So I think it will go on for quite some years, and we started having Jakob Hansen producing the album sonically, so that started last year. So we do everything at Charles' place, and once we're finished, he will send the tracks to Denmark to Jakob Hansen, and Jakob is doing the sonic production if you want. So it's a fantastic team.
But on the documents that I got from Napalm, it appears that you are listed as well as one of the producers of the album.
Yeah. I mean, interestingly, you're the second person to ever ask. Yes, yesterday was the first, and all the others before that didn't ask. Um, I mean, the only reason why I wanted to do that is that I thought um, I start taking care of the music once we start doing the demo. So basically, the decisions, how long a part will be, what guitars will be added where, and all that stuff, I'm sort of taking care of that. So in a way, I think it's not prolific. It's not that I say, oh, my ego wants to be a producer. That's absolutely not the case. It's just it's dirty work and somebody has to do it. So I am the one who's taking care and tries not to forget a single thing when we're in the studio. So I call that production. And after 5 albums, I thought, why shouldn't it be on the sleeves, on the sleeve if I do it all the time? So because in the end, you never know what the future holds. Maybe I will do that for another band as well, but if nobody reads it, I will never do it. So I decided that we have this co-production thing with me and Charles and the rest of the band because everybody has an input.
How do you approach it compared to how you do it as a musician? Because obviously when you are targeting as a musician, you're saying, okay, what can I do to add to what other people are doing? But in this case, you're looking in both to what the rest did as well as to what you did and looking at kind of from above and trying to feed all the pieces together. Is the change from going from a musician to starting to do this production work, although you've done it before in previous albums, is that a big switch for you?
Actually, absolutely not. No, it's something quite natural. I mean, we've been doing this for quite some years, and usually we were very, very democratic back in the day, which is a good thing. And basically, we're still democratic. But the thing is, we realized that when the time frame is getting quite narrow, when you have a limited amount of time, somebody really has to be in charge, at least to make sure that nothing gets forgotten. So I took that work. I took over that work a couple of years ago, and we think that it works very good this way. It's not that I tell Dolph how to play the drums. That's absolutely not the case. But it's I am I'm very sensitive when it comes to song arrangements, especially when we have a part, and I think that we're losing the interesting. I don't know the English word. In German, you say Spannungsbogen. When you lose the movement in a way. I'm very sensitive, and I always say, no, we have to kick that part. It's losing here. We have to add another one. It's rushed. We have to have a good movement from the first part to the last part, and the order of the songs has to be very, very balanced. Otherwise, the album is losing between song 5 and 6 or so. So that's something that I do with a lot of intuition in a way, and therefore it wasn't a change. I think I've been doing this ever since, and it's official now, whatever.
You've also been a very hardworking band since the starting of Hammer Kings, right? Because you have 7 years together since your debut, 5 albums since then. In fact, the previous one was, if I'm not mistaken, on June of last year. So that's just a little bit a year before you release Kingdemonium. How do you keep that machine going, and what was the reason to release music so quickly? I know that you've mentioned that, for example, Saxon sometimes managed to do 2 albums in a year or something, but how has it been for you to actually put pedal to the metal all the time?
First of all, the Hammer King album could have been earlier, but we changed labels in between. So we went from Crystal Sur to Napalm, which means when you're changing a label, until everything is set up, it takes maybe half a year. So we lost a bit of time, and then the COVID thing was there. So of course, they said we will release the album in the summer, not in the spring, because we will not be able to play a show. So we lost like a year for the Hammer King album in a way. So if you push it back, then we have the same space between all the albums. But once we had the Hammer King album released last year, and we entered the German charts, I think on 48 or 46, I'm not sure, I think it was 46, and that was quite a success. And still we could only play like 8 shows because of all the regulations. And I think in late October they reached out and said, we want to do another album with you, and it would be interesting to release it directly when the festivals start in 22. We said, that's a good plan, of course. And then said, yeah, but you have to understand it's late October. If you want to have the album released for the festival season, you have to deliver the final product at the end of March. Okay, which means we have to have the recordings finished at the end of February, which means we have to enter the studio at the end of January, which means it was 2.5 months actually. We had started writing before, but we seriously started writing then, and we had like 2.5 months. So it was, in a way, it was a question of, do we want to lose an entire year, or do we want to have the boost of the promotion and the public interest right then when the festivals and the concerts are coming back? And so I know that Dolph is always the critical person in the band, and I felt under a lot of pressure. We started, and we felt that it was tricky. The pressure was high. And then I remember one evening I turned to Dolph and said, do you think that we really can do this? And he looked at me and said, I think the way we work, we can do that. And that was the moment when I knew, and I told him, if you say so, then we can. And we did. And it was very good. It was a very enjoyable affair. Also, it was a very hard-working period. But in a way, I think after the 2 years that we lost to COVID, it was fantastic to record an album again so quickly. And I always say in the interviews, when you're a musician and you can make an album, why on earth shouldn't you make an album? It's really a very good experience to be in the studio. You always learn, you always progress when you do something. And still, we try not to make an album in 23. So we want to play live shows now. That's the focus.
But that has become also a challenge, I believe, because I know that you did Summer Breeze this year, you did Rock Hard Festival, if I'm not mistaken. But one of the challenges for a lot of bands is that now everybody's touring, because everybody's trying to kind of make up for the last 2 years where they had to postpone. Has that been much of a challenge for you, trying to find the space to simply be able to play in a certain place?
Actually, that's the only issue that we still sort of have. We have signed with Dirk Kleberger from Noisegate Productions now. He's also the one who's booking the Rock Hearts Festival, and he works with Doro and he works with Dark Tranquillity, if I'm right. So he's working for bands that play a lot, which was appealing to us. The initial plan was that Napalm would have been the booking agency as well, Napalm Events. But after a couple of months, Torsten from Napalm Events called me and he said, I want to be honest with you. Usually 30% of our bands are on the road, and at the moment it's 95%, which means, as you said, the market is super full, and I can't offer you anything because what we have on the road now is actually the tour from 2020 and maybe a tour from 2021, but they're all taking place in 2022. So it's tricky to get onto a tour at the moment because the tours have been carved in stone 2 years ago or 3 years ago already. But I think from what I see, from the development that I see, it will be quite good in 23. So I'm looking forward to 23, and I'm sort of relaxed because I think we will be on the road next year.
Connected to this issue of how many bands are touring, there's also the case that things are so different from when you and I were kids, for example, as to how much music you can access, right? Now you can listen to 1,000 different artists in a day, whereas when I was a kid, I don't think I could have ever accessed that many bands. How do you... Because I know that you have had some amount of success in Germany, your albums have charted quite well. So I am curious, what was the approach, the perhaps business or marketing approach that you took to kind of differentiate yourself in a way that would actually make you stand out? Because I think that you're very talented musicians, but there are many talented musicians who don't ever get recognized, right? So
On one hand side, I really think that we are just lucky because and that's the same thing that Charles from Powerwolf told me. I mean, they had been together in a different band before Powerwolf, and he told me, we have been doing this for so many years, practically in the same lineup, that once we started doing the Wolf, things felt like a relief because we felt it's getting better. And it's exactly what I said before. We were in other bands before that, and we know that we really will always continue because we love the music that we do. But once we started playing Hammer King, we understood that that's the way it feels when you do something that sort of has a dynamic of its own, which sort of walks on its own feet, so to speak. Um, I think what we always try is when we are on a festival, maybe you have a 3 or 4 days festival, there's 40,000 people, and they are watching. How many bands are that? 60 bands probably on this festival. When they see us, they shall go home after 4 days and at least remember us. So if we can get them to remember us, I think that's the biggest thing that you can achieve. And with the sort of image that we have about the king and the sort of speeches that I deliver on stage, which are different from the usual, hey, it's good to see you, you're the greatest audience in the world, and the next song is called, ha ha ha. So I mean, sometimes we get bashed in the press for things that I do. We claim to be from France when we started, and because we did so, we try to make the people say "oh la la," which is something that they all do that at the festivals. They all do it. You can do it for minutes. They do it, but the press hates it. And at the Summer Breeze, I even said on stage that we always get bashed up for doing this, what we're doing now, and they even wrote that in the review. So it's interesting, but on the other hand, maybe it's provocative, maybe it's not everybody's thing, but it makes it easier to remember. And it's entertaining, I mean, in a way. We always try, and that's very important for us. We try not to cross the line. We will not do anything just because we know it works. If it doesn't feel right musically, we will not do anything on stage which is below a certain standard, even if we know that it works. I personally would not do any drinking things. That's really not what I believe in, and I don't think it fits well with the Hammer King image. It could be an expensive wine, maybe that, but no beer battles or something. That's really not fitting for the direction of the band. But it has to be entertaining. And we were the last band on Summer Breeze, last day, last band on one of the stages. There were only two bands that were still playing once we stopped. And yet we could draw a real big audience for the show, which was at 1:30 at night. So that was really impressive, and it went until past 2. So that was very good to see that we can really attract an audience even that late, and that nobody is leaving. Two people were walking away. That were the only two I saw it, and the rest remained there for the entire show, and they were screaming and singing along. So I think it has to be sure, it has to be very clear that we are made for the live situation, that we have a way to connect with the audience. We are very communicative with the audience on the social medias, but also at the festivals and wherever. So that's what I think, what I believe in. That it's important that you have a connection with the audience because the market is very full.
I was recently reading about Lemmy Kilmister and how he used to play looking up, because when he started playing, he said, well, sometimes you would play in front of 7 people, and looking up lets you not realize that you're playing in front of 7 people. Tell me a little bit about those tough early beginnings for Hammer King, for example. What were the kind of painful experiences that maybe you encountered on a live show?
Interestingly, there were practically none. We had painful experiences with all the other bands before that. And I mean, playing on big stages is very much easier than playing on small stages, and that's exactly what Lemmy said. If you play in a small club and there's 7 people or 30 people or whatever, you are aware of every facial movement of all of them. And if somebody looks at the watch, at the clock, you start thinking, okay, are we not good tonight? Because it's if it's one of 7, it's many of the people. So
Mm-hmm.
actually, if you're playing on a big stage, that's very much easier because the energy is already there. You just don't have to put it into the audience all the time. But I can understand that. I didn't know that was the reason for the microphone thing, but it's totally understandable. We played a smallish festival, an indoors festival, early that year, and we were stepping in for Iron Xavier, who had to cancel, I think, for sickness, COVID reasons, whatever. And so we stepped into the lineup, headlining on a Thursday night, and the show was Saturday. So that was very short notice, and it was obvious that the people were not there for us because they had bought the tickets for a different headliner. That's natural, absolutely. And that was a tough show because I felt that pressure. And some of the people went away because they wanted to see Iron Savior. We were not Iron Savior, so they went home. It's natural. I would do the same probably. But that was a tricky show. That was a tricky show because you really give 200% trying to reach everybody. And that's maybe not what you usually do when you play music. Usually you focus on the music and not on really keeping the audience together. So that is the biggest problem we had, so to speak, and I think that's quite okay to have that problem.
For someone who doesn't know Hammer King, what do you think is a good starting point?
I must say, if you don't know Hammer King, get the Hammer King album from 21 first, and then get Kingdomonium, and then you can start with album number 1, 2, and 3. So that would be the thing, because I think essentially the 21 album is directly the center of what we usually do, and Kingdomonium is the variation of it. So the next album might be a variation of the Hammer King album again, or it might progress further. I don't know. Nothing has been written, but I think the essential album, and it's not a matter of quality, it's a matter of style. Stylistically essential, I think, is the Hammer King album from 21. So get that first. If you like it, get Kingdomonium, and you see how broad we are actually, and then you can start buying from the first album on, because I think the first one is a fantastic album. It's a very naive album, a very spontaneous album, but of course you can hear that we were younger and we're not that experienced. So
I have one more thing actually before I let you go. How did you land on Titan Fox?
oh my God, I must confess, I don't even remember, and that's the truth. Let me think for a second.
I think it's Titan Fox the fifth, right? It's
Yeah,
not.
the fifth, of course. I mean, once we decided to having this mythology, it was obvious that we needed to have a sort of names that fit with it. I mean, you would be surprised to have Chaim Witz and Stanley Eisen in Kiss. So of course, everybody
Yeah.
knows that the names were fitting to the image, and so we wanted to have names that were sort of interesting. And to be honest, when I was the vocalist for Ross the Boss, at least then I should have turned my name into Fox, because it was absolutely ridiculous for everybody outside of Germany. And I didn't think of it. I was young, so I didn't do it. I should have done so. And once we started playing with Hammer King, I knew that I wanted to have an international name.
You mean that it was ridiculous because people were calling you Patrick Fox? Or
Some Americans, Christian Americans, avoided calling me by my name because they were afraid it was like fuck. But the Christian ones, no, it's not fuck. He was super, super sweet with that. No, I mean, fox is a good thing. I mean, actually, everybody likes that and everybody understands it, and it's a good animal because it's witty and it's sort of intelligent. That's not a bad thing, and quite dangerous and small. Anyway, so and to have something that makes the fox bigger, it had to be something gigantic. So the Titan is quite fitting for a metal thing, and the fifth has a very, very simple reason. I'm playing a flying V, and it was pretty new for me still. By that time, we converted the band to Hammer King, and so I added this Roman 5 to the name because of the flying V. That's actually everything, and yeah. So I've given away all the secrets tonight.
my first guitar was a Flying V, and that was a terrible idea because it's very difficult to put it on your leg when you're trying to play.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which again, if you're a very clumsy 14-year-old, that was a terrible idea. But I just wanted to look badass playing a guitar, so
I always wanted to have the flying V. And you remember when you were young, it's always the same. You saved some money and you were pretty close to buying a thing and the car was broken. Then you saved again and the car was broken again. And that happened so many times. And once I had the money, the people told me that this red flying V is not in production anymore. And I was totally frustrated because I thought, yeah, I've been living for this moment for 10 years or so. And then I found two stores in all of Germany that had this thing. One was a standard model, and the one that I got is a custom-made one. It's built in the United States, and it's different, and it was more expensive, and so on. But I looked at it, and I really found it very, very nice, very appealing. So I knew I had to get this guitar. And once I got it, I've never played anything else anymore. So things were falling into place. Everything was sort of perfect, really. And that's, I mean, you never know how far things will go. It's you can't predict that. But I think we can say that we're very happy with what we are doing, and we are happy with what we have achieved, and may the road go on. I mean, whatever comes.
Patrick, Titan, thank you so much for your time today, man. It was really a pleasure to meet you.
All mine. Thank you very much. Let's talk again next year or so.